Well, for more on college careers and leveling the playing field, let's talk to Hua-Yu Sebastian Cherng, Assistant Professor of International Education at New York University. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rachelle.
Now, we've already seen what some parents are willing to do to get their children into certain colleges. But talk about some of the ways wealthier, more connected parents are giving their children a leg up in the post-college job market.
So there are a number of studies that ask recent graduates who are working how they found their jobs. And the United States, similar to pretty much every country in the world, finds that it's actually social networks. So the majority of graduates say that they have a connection that actually hooked them up to their job. And this is something that I think is common knowledge in many other contexts in the world. But in the US, we have a persistent understanding that the harder you work, the more likely you'll get a great job, which in many contexts is actually quite a myth.
So then how does this sort of inequality impact the career paths for some of these first-generation students who don't have these connections?
So, like you said, by definition, first generation, they're the first in their family to attend university. So their parents not only oftentimes don't have the information to help them navigate courses to choose and majors to that will lead to jobs, but after they graduate, their parents likely don't have the connections or the friends to actually say, oh, I can call up my college buddy to get you a job in their company. And this is what we say in sociology, that it actually exacerbates inequalities, that those who are more likely to enter college are also more likely to get a job through their social networks.
So for everybody else, what can families who don't have the money and the connections do to really help further their children's postgraduate job prospects?
So this is where I always say to put more responsibility on families that are already marginalized it may be an easy solution, but I don't think it's actually the lasting solution. And here I actually turn to universities, and many of them have great programs to support academically first-generation students. But I think that the broader set of skills, particularly soft skills, that universities can give students will really help them as they look for jobs.
So is this sort of inequality something that we see in some industries versus others?
Yes. So there's quite a bit of research, particularly on immigrant origin students and Asian American students, that they will actually pursue careers that they perceive to be more meritocratic. So for instance, in the science technology fields, because they know that to get a job as a lawyer or to get a job in media production often requires lots of connections and networks and connections that their parents likely don't have.
Now, it's interesting because Alibaba founder Jack Ma says your first job is your most important job and that your priority should be finding the right mentor and learning the so-called soft skills. How does that combination further a new graduate's job prospects?
So I actually completely agree with him that your first job is the one that sets the path in your career. And yes, a mentor is very, very important. For middle, upper class families and wealthy families, oftentimes a mentor is a family friend, or it could be your parents themselves. And so the student would have very easy access to this person. For the working class and the first generation and also immigrant origin students, they simply don't have those connections. So I think that oftentimes when they're told to work very hard, they may have a great GPA, but suddenly in the job market, it's not a very simple path.
Now, there's this idea of the strength of weak ties. Tell us about this concept of interpersonal relationships and why we should be paying attention to it.
Sure. So weak ties, in contrast to strong ties, often refers to the depth of relationship between two individuals. And I think for mental health outcomes, we often say that strong ties with few friends is good. But for job searching, it's actually quite the opposite. That weak ties, so kind of a very cursory or superficial knowledge of someone, can often make the difference in terms of a recommendation for a job. And it can be as weak as this is the son of a family friend who I've never met, but because we have this tertiary tie, the relationship, and this is a very weak tie, that it can make all the difference in the labor market.
And one thing that's very interesting, a lot of these universities have some very powerful alumni. They have a lot of spending power. So a lot of people are wondering, what should universities be doing? What sort of responsibility should they have when it comes to really leveling this playing field for all students?
So I think the universities oftentimes have to deal with competing interests. On one hand, there is always a focus on endowments, so having their graduates go into those positions that are very money-making, so they can donate back. And simply investing in the middle upper class is actually probably the most efficient way of going. But universities are also increasingly addressing directly inequalities, and this is where I think that the growth of the investment should be placed in, so that universities can focus more on just academically supporting first-generation students, but teaching them to network, not just saying networking is so important.
Hopefully all these upcoming graduates heed your words. Thank you so much, Hua-Yu Sebastian Cherng, Assistant Professor of International Education at New York University.